Joe Whisnant served in the U.S. Army during World War II. He fought in Europe as a radio operator with the 575th Field Artillery Battalion. All right, Joe, you from North Carolina, and you knew the war had broken out, and you were still in high school.
Yes.
And tell me about how you finished high school.
Well, like I said before, I was in the 11th grade in high school, and I knew the war was coming along, and I was 18 years old in the 11th grade, and I asked my principal if I could transfer to a county school so I could graduate in a lower grade, 11th grade, in county school. So I transferred out there and graduated in the 11th grade in a county school in North Carolina. So that's what I graduated in.
Okay, then after you graduated high school, were you drafted right away, or?
Yeah, I graduated in May of 1943, and in 43, in May, I was 18, and I got a notice in September of 1943 I was going to be drafted. So I was drafted, called down to the recruiting office in Charlotte, and asked to sign up. And we were informed as a group, there was other guys with me, that we were going to go to, I believe it was Jacksonville, South Carolina, at a recruiting, at an area where they take you all in, you know. So we went down there, and I noticed that very day, I noticed that on the bulletin board there was a notice that the Air Force was looking for pilots for training. And I thought, well, that would be a good deal if I could get in there, you know, so I thought I might try it. So I asked for an application, and they gave me one, and I filled it out, and then I took the examination later that day, and I passed it, and of course I went to the physical there and passed that okay, and I was hoping that I would hear from them fairly soon after the application was run through the office. So I was there for about a week, and they said, well, your teeth are not in good shape, so we had to take you to the doctor and get your teeth in shape if you're going into the Air Force. So they took me to the dentist and got my teeth all in good shape, and I was assigned to an airfield in South Carolina. So a few days later, to my surprise, I got a letter back, and it was really a big surprise to me, because they told me that they were sorry they were going to have to refuse me because they had met their quota for that particular time, and they couldn't take me in as a pilot or navigator. So that was a big letdown for me. So I just couldn't get over that, but I thought, well, I'm already in the Army practically, so I might as well go ahead and go with them, because they're going to take me in anyway, you know. So they assigned me to Fort Bragg, North Carolina for basic training, which had to do with howitzers, learning how to fire the guns, 7-man group in the howitzers, and also learning the carbine, how to use that. And also on the side, they let you learn how to copy code for communications if you want to be a radio operator. So prior to that time, I had attended the Charlotte Amateur Radio School in Charlotte and learned the code myself. I was slow, but I was building up to speed. And so we started, after we went to Fort Bragg, we started the training course. And on the off hours, we take the training for practicing the code. And I was able to build up 24 words a minute, which was better than average, actually. So I was happy for that. So we were there about 3 to 4 months for the basic training. So after the basic training was done, they decided who was going to go to advanced training after they learned the code. So they decided about 60 of us would be sent to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And we were put on a train then and sent to Oklahoma for additional training. So we went out there, and we trained how to repair and service radio transmitters and receivers. And that lasted about 2 or 3 months. So while I was out there, my brother just happened to he owned a dry cleaning plant in Ardmore, Oklahoma. So I went to visit him, and while I was there, this is sort of on the side, he had a young girl there, was his cashier, and I got to know her, so I started dating her. Her name was Sally, I remember. So I dated her while I was there, and then went back to Fort Sill, of course. So we finished the training at Fort Sill, and then I think about March, we finished it, and we were sent on a delayed route, as they called it, to Virginia. And we were going to be sent to, let's see, where was it, Virginia? I can't think now what it was in Virginia. I think I wrote it down. Hampton Roads, Virginia is where we were sent to. And on this delaying route, we could go home, of course, for 10 days. And so I was at home for 10 days with my mother, because my father had passed away a year before that time. So after the 10 days, then I contacted the local office for the train schedules, and I got on a train in Charlotte, North Carolina then, and it went up to Virginia then, and it had been snowing, and we went up through Charlottesburg, Virginia, beautiful area because it's all snow and all evergreens and everything, you know. It was a beautiful sight. So I went up there to get on board, or get ready to get on board a ship to go overseas. So after we were there about 2 or 3 weeks getting prepared to go, and all of us guys were assigned different times to take care of the old coal stove type pot-bellied stoves in each end of the barracks where we were in Virginia. So we were there a few weeks, and we didn't do too much during that particular time, but then when the time was up, then we were fitted with military gear and uniforms, new uniforms, and so on. And one morning, it was the first part of May, I believe it was, we were taken to the port of Norfolk there and loaded on board a Liberty ship. So we got on this Liberty ship and started out then, and we didn't know where we were going at that time, but they finally told us we were going to Italy. So we started out for Italy. We were a big convoy of about 50 or 60 ships, and it was protected by destroyers and cruisers, no battleships, but just cruisers and destroyers, and to protect us from the submarines, the German submarines. So while on board, it sort of storming got pretty rough, and I got pretty seasick. And man, I couldn't hardly eat. I couldn't keep my food down. So I was seasick for about 10 days on that doggone ship. So my buddies took me up on board the ship to get some fresh air and see the ocean, and I finally got over the seasickness. But it took us 29 days to go to Italy, and we were supposed to go to Naples and unload, but they had a cargo for Bari, which was on the other side of Italy, on the east coast of Italy, I guess it was. So the ship went all the way around the bottom part of Italy and landed at Bari, and the area there, harbor, was known as Little Pearl Harbor because there were so many ships that had been sunk there, and you could see them sticking out of the water because the Germans had sunk quite a few ships there. and that was referred to as Little Pearl Harbor. So we unloaded, after 29 days we loaded at Berry, and they loaded us onto boxcars. But these boxcars wasn't like American boxcars. They were only 4 wheels instead of 8 like our boxcars do. And our boxcars are pretty good size too, compared to theirs. So we went all the way from Berry, all the way across the peninsula of Italy to now I can't even think where I was going. To Italy there, on the west side, where we were going to be camping for the 9th and 8th we got there. And at Naples, couldn't think what it was, Naples. So they said, well, while you're here, you're going to have to dig a foxhole because the Germans are still bombing the area. It's safer to be in a foxhole when they come over. So we did. So it took us all night to get there, and that night we did have a bombing of the area, but I was so tired I didn't even hear him. It was so loud, but I didn't even hear it. It didn't even wake me up. So we were there for a day or two, and then they took us to a little town called Santa Maria, which is right next to Naples. And the whole area was covered with black ash from Mount Vesuvius. Mount Vesuvius had erupted 3 months before we got there. And the whole area was just covered with old black ash. So we were there for a few days for prior training. And then they took us by 6-bys down to the southern tip of Italy to prepare us to practice the communication commands and everything that we were going to be using for an invasion of Italy, which at the time we didn't know exactly where it was going to happen, you know. So we went down to the southern tip, and we started doing our maneuvers down there, and all of a sudden I come down with a terrific stomach ache. And I couldn't figure out what it was. The doctors couldn't either. So when that happened, they put me on a small ship and took me around the boot of Italy all the way back up to Naples into the hospital up there. And they discovered I had diverticulitis. If you know what that is, it's an infection in the colon. They don't know how I got it, and I don't know either. So anyway, I was in there about a week, and they finally got me over it. And then they brought me back down there by truck this time, not by ship this time. And so I went back to finish the training, which was about a week left. And then they brought us back up to Naples again. And by that time, it was about the 1st of August, I believe, in 1944. So we were getting all prepared and getting all of our gear together, new uniforms, and getting our firearms issued to us. And I was issued a carbine, 30 caliber carbine, and then I also picked up a 45 caliber pistol, and also picked up that Thompson submachine gun. It's actually precaution, more or less. So then about August the 12th or 13th, I believe it was, we loaded on board these LSTs, but each of us radio operators were given a Jeep, and the Jeep had a trailer on it, and on the Jeep itself it had the radio equipment, a transmitter and a receiver, so we could communicate with the invasion forces, and also a trailer that had cases of food for the troops and as well as ourselves. So we loaded on board all of that on the LST, and there was about 7 groups of us on an LST, and we left about, I think it was around the 13th or 14th of August, and the 15th of August is when we landed on the beach at Nice, right near Nice in southern France. But during that time, we were being also protected by P-38 fighter planes just circling all around us, giving us extra protection, you know. And also with us was the battleship Texas. That was a ship we were going to communicate with and give them commands. So about 6:30 in the morning then, we landed, and we didn't quite make it to the beach. We were out in the water about maybe 1.5 feet, but we had waterproofed our Jeeps before we left with Cosmoline and spark plugs and the distributor, and they were safe. They didn't get any water in them, so we got home on land okay. So after that, after we got in a little bit, we were in the second wave. The first wave was infantrymen, so we were in the second wave, and we were looking to see where the enemy was. We tried to get as close to the front as we could behind the infantry to see where there was concentration of troops and vehicles. So we did that, and whenever we saw a concentration of it, we'd note that we had maps of the area. And we noted the location up on the maps, and we'd give the coordinates back to the battleship Texas, and the battleship Texas would fire one round just to see where it would land, and we would try to observe where it landed. So after that happened, we would observe where it landed, and if it was right on target, we'd give the command, fire for effect. But if it wasn't on target, let's say it was 200 yards to the right and 100 yards beyond it, we'd say left 200 and down 100 and give them the command to fire again. And then when that happened, if it was on target, we'd say we'll fire for effect again. So then they would fire again until they wiped out the area. So we did that for about about 2 hours, I think, during the invasion. So after that, we got a little bit beyond the range of the battleship Texas. We couldn't reach it anymore because they don't have a range of 21 miles. We were inland then. So after that, the Texas left the area then. And then as we moved inland with our Jeeps, large guns were brought in, like that picture I just showed you. It showed that 8-inch shell that they fired from those guns. And they had about 5 or 6 of them, best I can remember. And then they fired, they got up close to the front lines as they could with that gun emplacement, and used that gun to fire on the targets behind the enemy lines then. And when that happened then, we radio operators became programmers to help determine how many gunpowders would be put into the gun to fire for what range it had. So we become computers in, more or less, operators, you might say. So we followed that procedure for quite a while. And I forget how long it lasted. I can't remember how long it lasted. But then later on, they had self-propelled 155 guns, I remember, that fired on the enemy. They were mounted on a tank. And we had those for about a week or so as we moved on up through France. And we moved on through Cologne area and into Germany then finally. And then we got into Mannheim. And after we got into Mannheim, we were pushing the Germans back pretty far. And we were selected to regroup and re-equip the ex-prisoners of war that were prisoners of the Germans during the war, like North Africans and Frenchmen, and also Polish guys and so on, and some Russians. And we were stationed in Mannheim then, and the war was almost over then. So I was in Mannheim, and in Mannheim, we were fitting these ex-prisoners of war with new uniforms and equipment to send them back to their own country. And while I was there, my commanding officer, Major Flowers was his name, selected me for some reason, I don't know why, to deliver classified information to General Eisenhower's headquarters in Frankfurt, Germany. And so they got me a Jeep and 2 guards to go with me, and we left in the afternoon, late in the afternoon, to take this classified information up to the headquarters of Eisenhower headquarters in Germany there. So we left and went up there, and we got there late in the afternoon, and after we delivered the classified information, they took us to the cafeteria. We had dinner then about 6 o'clock then. So after that then we started back, but because the war wasn't quite ended yet, we couldn't drive with our headlights on. We had to drive with these little small lights on the fenders of the Jeeps. That's all we had. And it had been raining also, so we were slowed down quite a bit. So we drove back to Mannheim, but it took us quite a few hours to get back. And by the time I got back to Mannheim, it was raining quite a bit, and the roads were slick. And when I got to the entrance where we were stationed, all these buildings that had been set up for us to equip all these ex-prisoners of war, as I entered the entrance and started to make a left-hand turn, the road was slippery, and the Jeep just flipped over. And the 2 guards with me got thrown out. They didn't get hurt. But due to the fact that the Jeep, the guy that had been assigned the Jeep before had changed out the military seat and put in a civilian car seat, it was pretty up close to my belly, you know, and it held me in when it flipped over. And when it did, it cut my face open, fractured my skull, broke my jaw, fractured my wrist. So it knocked me out, actually. So there was blood all over the place, so to speak. So my 2 guards that got thrown out, it was okay. They picked me up, turned the Jeep over, picked me up, and then they laid me over the side of the road, and then they called a medical unit in Mannheim because it was just a few miles away from where we were. So in the meantime, I was unconscious laying there, and it was dark, you couldn't hardly see anything. But those ex-prisoners of war that were in the buildings that we were outfitting them in heard a commotion out there, you know, and they come out there, and they saw me laying there, and one of the, I don't know if he was Polish or Russian or what, saw my watch, and they love watches. So one of them stooped down and was going to undo my watch, and when that happened, I opened my eyes, it scared him, and he jumped back. And he didn't get my watch. I was able to hold on to it. So I still got that watch today. So they put me in an ambulance. The ambulance finally got there for about 15 minutes or so. They took me to the medical unit in Mannheim, Germany, and they sewed my face up and took out my broken teeth that I had acquired in the accident. And I was there for 3 days, and my whole face was all swollen up due to being all cut open like that, you know. So after 3 days, they couldn't do anything with my broken jaw. They didn't have the facilities to do that. So they put me on a stretcher, and they took me and a few other guys that had been hurt or in a shot or something. I can't remember exactly what. And put us on a DC-2 or DC-3 plane and flew us to Paris, France for the general hospital there. And there, then they fixed my jaw so that they put little metal clips on the teeth that I had left, and they put rubber bands across the little parts of my teeth where the clips were to hold my jaw closed. So therefore, I wouldn't be able to eat regular food, you know. So from there on out, all I could eat was potato soup and ice cream. So 6 times a day I ate potato soup and ice cream. So I was in the hospital 63 days, and 3 days at the hospital in Mannheim. So 66 days I was in the hospital altogether. So after being there for all that time, the jaw finally healed up, and we were released. We were released in a way that we could move around or go into Paris and see different sites after about 40 to 50 days, you know. My jaw, they finally took the clips off and I could eat food. So then I went into Paris and saw the Eiffel Tower and a few other things in Paris and also. So then I, after the 66 days were up, we come back, and then they finally assigned me to a group that we had more than enough points to come back home because the war was over there. So I was assigned to Camp Lucky Strike, as it was called, different camps where they prepared soldiers ready to go back to the States. They were named after different cigarettes, I guess. Camp Lucky Strike was one I went to. So they prepared us there, and then after about a week or so, they had another Liberty ship. I sort of dreaded thinking about Liberty ship again because I'd been sick on the other Liberty ship. But this time, this Liberty ship only took less than 10 days to come across the Atlantic back to New York. So I got across the Atlantic without getting sick this time. So I finally got back to New York, and then they took us to I guess the name of the military base in New Jersey. It seemed like it's Fort Monmouth or something like that. And got us ready and discharge papers and everything. And then we got a train pass back to our home state, back to my home state of North Carolina. And they gave us so much money for discharge with our papers. And then I headed back towards home on a train then. And then I ended up back in Hickory, North Carolina, because my mother, who lived in Charlotte, and our home was in Charlotte, had sold the home. So I didn't have a place to go back to in Charlotte. I ended up in Hickory. And that's where I was until I was there until I decided to go to college then. So that was the end of my trip in service.
What did it feel like being a veteran of World War II and you know, victory, and what was that like?
It felt pretty good. I was glad to get through it. I was glad to get back, of course. And I was happy that it didn't exactly kill me, but come pretty close to getting killed at the time, you know. But I never knew what would happen because I was in an invasion myself, and you never know when a shell would land near you or hit you, you know. And it was just a good feeling to get back and know that you got through it okay. Because I had 6 cousins that were brothers in the service, and 2 of them got killed, but one of them ended up being a prisoner of war. His name was Paul Abernathy, and he was from Hickory also. But he finally got out. In fact, General Patton's army men rescued him from the camp in Germany. He told me, and the write-up on him is in a little book that's been published also. So it was interesting reading about my cousin there.
Did you get to correspond with your mom, or?
Yeah, I wrote letters back and forth to my mom, and also to my girlfriend Sally in Oklahoma. And after the war, my brother had a Chrysler convertible. My brother was a minister, he was an evangelist. He knew Billy Graham very well. And I borrowed his convertible, and I drove out to Oklahoma to visit the girl Sally that I met in Oklahoma. But I didn't make any promises to her because I knew I had signed up for college and I couldn't make any promises. So I come back and started college in Fort Wayne, Indiana Technical College.
Okay. Tell us about the hat that you're wearing.
Well, the hat is a 45th Thunderbird Division, and they were the Oklahoma Guard Division. And I was with that division on the Southern France invasion, and the invasion consisted of the 7th Army, which had three divisions, the 3rd, 36th, and 45th. And those three divisions had been under the control of General Patton in North Africa. But after they finished in North Africa, they come back to Italy and got prepared for the invasion. And three divisions was given to General Patch for the invasion, and that's who a general was for during the invasion. And then he commanded the three divisions for the invasion itself. So that was the end of my experience.
Well, great. Well, you did a great job, and we're proud of your service.
Okay,
Good. And thank you.
okay, good. Glad to give it to you.